Good morning, Web Part-Time 8. Today we're going to be creating a simple to-do app with all the functionality for creating, reading, updating, and deleting to-dos. Um, we're going to set our local to-do or to-dos to local storage. So let's get started. First thing is I'm in my terminal, so I'm going to issue the command. So we're going to do an npx, and we're going to do create React app. And I'm just going to call this Web Part-Time 8. So I press enter and I'm waiting for the fun process of installing all the packages dependencies. So it's fetching the packages now. Now it's building them. I am using Yarn for my package manager, but you can use npm by just issuing the commands there is. And this is the fun part, waiting for all the packages to install. Alright, so now that we have our freshly created React app installed, let's go ahead and cd into that directory, which I called Web Part-Time 8. And then first thing I like to do is I like to go into the source directory. And then I don't use any of these files to start, so all I'm going to do is remove star. And with removing star, I have taking out all the boilerplate things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating my files. And if you're using a Unix style terminal, if you type touch and then the name of the file name, it will create the file for you. So I've just created my index.jsx file. Alright, so now I want to make a couple directories. First directory I'm going to make is my component, and this is where all the components are going to live. And then the next directory I'm going to make is called hooks. Now this is where all my custom hooks are going to be housed. Alright, so then I'm going to my components. And then the only component I'm going to make through here is going to be my app component. Now, if you notice, I'm using JSX as a file extension, which is perfectly fine. There's no difference other than JSX will tell your IDE that this is a React JavaScript file. All right, so I'm gonna come back down to the Web Part-Time 8 directory and some packages that we're going to need. Well, I know we're going to need the router, so I'm gonna go ahead and add the router. Oh, so that's React Router DOM. Let's see what other packages that we may need. Well, I know ahead of time that I think I'm going to style this with Bootstrap, so I'm going to go ahead and add the React strap to this. Now you can use React strap or you can use React Bootstrap. They're almost the same package. I prefer React Bootstrap. And with that, I also need to bring Bootstrap in. and see what other packages. Well, let's use Formic. And with Formic, we're going to use Yup. So we just learned this last night. So I'm going to show you how to do it with to-dos or task list or whatever I decide to call it. So I think that's all the dependencies we need for right now. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter and install the packages, and then we're going to go into our code, our Visual Studio Code. All right, awesome. So now we have that. So now I'm going to do code period, which should open my Visual Studio Code. And let me bring it over. All right, so now you see that we have our source file with our two folders that we added, which are custom hooks, and our app folder and our components. So let's work inside of index.jsx right now. So we know that we're going to import React from React. So there's a few shortcuts you can use. I like doing IMR, and it doesn't work. So, oh, there it is. It just took a second to load. So there's our import React from React. If you, y'all should be able to go down and install this ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native snippets, and there's all kinds of snippets for making your less type in. All you have to do is type the things like I just did IMR from React, which is right here, import React from React. So let's go back to our index.js. Well, I know IMRD, and sometimes it does not like for my thing to work. So there, it takes a moment for it to load up. So IMRD is import React DOM from React DOM. All right, cool. Now we know we brought in the router, so let's go ahead and import our router. All right there, so now we have our router, right? Now, the next thing we need is our app. So we're just going to go ahead and import our app. So we've imported our app from the components directory and app. All right. The next thing I like to do is I want to import my Bootstrap style sheet. So if I go over here, import Bootstrap distribution CSS Bootstrap that should work. Let me try that again, because Bootstrap Alright, so I'm having a couple issues trying to get this import to work. So I know it's Bootstrap distribution CSS Alright, so don't remember where the Bootstrap files are laid at. So I'm going to come over here to my No Modules folder and find the Bootstrap folder and see where the minimum So it should be in distribution, CSS. Ah, there it is. So that should work right there. So that brings in our bootstrap styles. All right. So now the next thing I need to do is I'm gonna go ahead and render this app. So let's do React DOM dot render. So we're going to render our app. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to surround our app with the router. Just like that. And then we're going to select our root element. Just like that. And then I'm going to save it. And there we go. Alright, so the next file that I want to go is I want to make sure that my app, we're going to render hello world to the DOM. So let's see. So if I do RFCE, okay, RFCE will create a functional component for us. So when I hit tab, we have a functional component with everything typed out for us. The only thing I have to come down here is render a little hello world h1 tag. Now looks like that's so right there, in just like 5 keystrokes I have created a functional component without typing it all out. So once again, that command is RFCE RFCE, and that will create a functional component with your export default at the end. Alright, so let's go into our terminal and run this. So I'm going to do my yarn start. And it's going to bring it up. And that is not right. Okay, so why is that not right? Look, we're live trying to figure this out. All right, awesome. So there's our hello world. Now I'm going to inspect the page, and I want to make sure that my bootstrap styling is in place. I can tell by just inspecting the HTML tag right here that all the colors that are from bootstrap are in. So we have our bootstrap styling in the app. At this point, it is a good time to decide to commit our changes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come over here to Visual Studio Code and click on this little source control thing. And I'm just going to say app rendering. And then I'm going to click this little check mark. Alright, all my changes have been committed. Alright, well, with that being said, let's go to our next. What's our next step here? So we have our router. We know we have our router because if we inspect the page and we click on this little components tab, if you have your React DevTools installed, you could see that the router provider is there as the browser router. Alright, awesome. So what do we need to do next? So let's create a form. Alright. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. Let's click on our Files tab. In Components, I'm going to make a new folder. And in this new folder, I'm going to call it, let's call it Tasks, T-A-S-K-S. Alright. Now this task is going to house all of our components. So, and I like to do folder for each component. So this is going to be the task form. And then I'm going to create a new file called taskform.jsx. Alright, so that brings our thing back in. If we remembered, we did RFCE, and now we have our functional component. And we're just going to call this, we're just going to say task form. Now I like just to do it standard first and wire everything up just to make sure it all works. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my app.jsx, and instead of this instead of this hello world, because we know that's rendering, I want to render the task form. Alright, so I rendered it. Alright. And I did a little something wrong here. When you're doing components, you have to do Pascal case for your components. That should have renamed. And it's not wanting to rename. Why is it not wanting to rename? Alright, let me put the form back in there. Alright, so now we have our task form, right? So we're over here. We need to bring it in. So we're going to import task form from, and then we're going to go up to task, task form, task form. Alright. Alright, and we have it compiled successfully. Now you can see we have our task form. If you come down here, you can see that we are rendering our task form there. Alright, awesome. Alright, so let's go build out our task form. Alright, so our task form needs to have inputs. So let's just build it out before styling. So we'll go ahead and erase this we'll keep this H1 there for the moment so that way we can see what we're working with. So we know that we're going to need, I want to have one input for this. So the only input we're going to have is a task input. So we're going to input, we're going to call it name equals task, value equals, well, we haven't set that up yet. So what do we need to do? So let's go ahead and bring in use state. Use state is a hook from React that lets you hook into the state API of React. So let's name it. So we're going to just say const. Alright, now we're going to have our dependency array. So I'm going to call this form values. Alright, and set form values equals use state. And what do I want to put into this use state? Well, you see that I have tasks there, but the object is going to be more than just task. So let's go ahead and open up an object. Alright, so this object, we're going to have three things on this object. We're going to have an ID, and this ID I'm going to default to null. We will touch that ID in a little bit. Alright, now we know that we're going to have a task. Right? So that task is going to be an empty string. And then the other thing we're going to have is we're going to have a completed boolean. So we're going to just say completed. And it's going to be set to false. So there's our initial state for use state. Alright. So now we have our name equals task. Our value is going to be set to, we're going to open up our curly braces so we can do a JavaScript expression. So it's going to be set to form values dot task. That way we can control the input. Alright. And then we're going to have an on change handler. That way every time it changes, it's going to handle the change. So we're going to do handle change here. Alright, so since handle change is not defined yet, we're going to have to define it. Alright, and then we'll just close it off just like that. And on top of that, we'll have a label, and we'll just call it task for now. Very basic styling. So, and then the biggest thing I forgot is we need to have a form tag surrounding that. Alright. Alright, like I said, I'm getting an error. The handle change is undefined. So let's talk about the handle change function. So handle change is going to be a function. It's going to be a function. Alright. And it's going to take in a event. E for short. Alright. So let's go ahead and open it up. And then we're just going to, what we're going to do with this, we're just going to set form values. Alright. Form values is going to be an object. We're going to spread in our state. And then we're going to say we're going to put in our array brackets, but it's not an array, it's a expression to get the key. So it's going to be our e.target.name, and then we're going to do e.target.value. So every time it changes, that's what it's going to look like. But you know, let's do some object destructuring with this event. So let's come up here and say, instead of just doing E, what if we did target and then we open up name and value as destructuring. So now instead of saying e.target.name, we can just say name and value. Alright, so let's see if this works. So we're going to go ahead and save it. And it says set form values is not defined. Did I misspelled it up here. There we go. Now that should render it. It does render. Now look, we have a task on here. Alright, and notice in our thing, we now have state showing up. So if I type in here, so if I type in hello, you notice that our state down here in our hooks is being updated. So awesome. So we have the update functionality working. Alright, let me open up my code again. So that's working. We have our form. The only other thing we have to define is a handle submit. So let's just define that. Now I like to name my function helper functions handle, and then whatever it needs to be doing. So this is going to pass in an E. So with single page applications, the submit functionality by default for HTML will automatically refresh the page. Well, we don't want that. So if we refresh the page, we'll lose all of our data. So what we're going to do is do our e.prevent default. And just at the moment, we're just going to console.log the values. Alright, and then on our form, we're just going to do an on submit equals handle submit. Alright, so let's go look at it. Once again, bring up our browser, and let's go to the console, and let's type in hello again and press enter. Oh, when I press enter, it submits, which is nice. That's why you put the on submit on the form tag. So now it's console logging out the object. So if I put in something else like goodbye, it now console logs out the new object. Very nice. So we have our task form. Our task form is taking an input, and it's the task is actually controlled by state. And when we submit, we're console logging out the task object to the console, which is good. All right, so this is a good time to go ahead and commit our changes. And we'll just say task form created. And then we'll just hit our little check mark to commit our changes. Awesome. All right. So what do we do next? Now we have a form that takes this and adds it in. So I guess the next thing to do is, how are we going to store the task? Well, the storing the task can be done easily with setting them to local storage. So local storage is a window object method that will store information passed to the application, and it'll save it to local storage so it can be re-rendered or brought back up for you. So from there, and sorry, I am going to pause the recording. All right, sorry about that. So we have, so just to reiterate, we have our goodbye and stuff. So now we were talking about setting it to local storage. So what we're going to do is I want to go to my app. Okay. So my app, we need to define some state in my app. So we're going to go ahead and bring in the use state hook. Okay. And let's see here, and we're just going to call it task. So we're going to say const, and then we're going to say task and set task equals use state, and we're going to call that an empty array. All right. So that way, when the application first loads, before any tasks are in there, it'll do the map functionality without erroring out. All right. So now that we have that, we're going to pass down our set task as a prop down to our task form. That way we can have that. So, all right, awesome. So let's go ahead and go back into our task form. All right, so on this handle submit, all right, let's get an ID. So what we're going to do is say set form values. All right, and then we're going to pass in all the form values, and then the ID, I'm just going to set it to a new date dot now. All right, so, and then after that, so I know that we're bringing in set task from our app, passing it down as props. So now all I'm going to do here is go set task, and we're going to pass it in form values. Oh, my bad. Hold on just to that thought. I've actually got to pass down the whole the task array as well, so that way we don't overwrite it every time. So we're just going to say task equals task. That way we're not overwriting it. And now let's go back to our task form, and set task is going to take in our we're going to spread in our task that's coming from props, and then we're going to add form values to it. So that should give us a new task. All right. So up here in our app, just to test this out, I'm going to console.log task. All right. So let's save it and let's see if it works. So bring back up our browser. All right. And let's refresh it. All right. So we have an empty array. That's good. Let's try task 1. And we have an error. Date.now is not a constructor. Okay. So let's go back to that. And we'll take out the new keyword. So that's in our task form. And we'll just take out the new keyword. And now we'll save. And we'll try this again. So let's say hello. Oh, our array is populating. We have our first one. But the ID is not working. Alright, let's go look at that functionality. Let's try. Alright, let's go look at that. Let's just do it a few more times. But I don't think the ID... Oh, the ID is working. It's very weird. Not really sure why that didn't work, but now we have an array of tasks where the ID is populating by the current time. Alright, so awesome. So we have this. Well, here's our dilemma. If we refresh the page, we lose it. So now that we know that we have this, what is the best way for us to continuously setting local storage? Well, we could set it in our form app. I mean, we could, but I think managing our state should be in the same component. So in this component, this app.jsx component, we know task is changing every time. So we have a hook that we can use, and we're going to bring it in as use effect. Alright, so our use effect hook is basically going to be we're going to define it here. So use effect takes a callback function and a dependency array. Now, if this dependency array is empty, it is not going to, it will only fire once. But I want it firing every time that a new task is added. So in the dependency array, I'm going to type in task, just like that. Alright, so what's going to happen every time the task is updated? Well, on first load, we're going to check to see if, because this is going to run first at all times. So let's check it. So the best way to check local storage is we're going to do if, and then we're going to say local storage, and then get item. And then we're going to pass it in the key. Get item will retrieve anything from local storage. Alright, so we're just going to call this task. Alright, so because I did not set that to a variable, JavaScript's going to evaluate that to a truthy variable. So if it's there, it's going to be true. If it's not, it's going to be false. So awesome. So what I'm going to do now is, well, if it's there, okay, it's going to set the, if it's there, we're going to remove it and then reset it. So actually I want this one. Hold on, I got behind on my logic. Sorry about that. So yes, we're going to set task to the local storage dot get item task. Okay, so we got that there, right? But I think what we're going to do is just to, if task is equal to an empty array, we're going to, let's see here. So if task is empty to an equal array, which means we have 0 tasks, this will be the load. We're going to go ahead and get all the items out of task if they're there. Alright, so else else, and then let's open up a callback. So now if task is not empty, we want to set our local storage to that. So what we're going to do is first thing is we're going to remove. So if it's there, because maybe it's not there on the first time we do a task, we're going to remove or we're going to do local storage dot remove item, then pass in the task, and then we're going to set it right here. So local storage dot set item. Set item takes two parameters, the key, and then we're going to JSON stringify, and on that JSON stringify we're going to pass in our task. Now when we're setting up here, I forgot that we need to actually JSON parse our local storage get item. Now the reason we do that is because local storage stores everything in a JSON object. So in order for us to set it, we need to stringify it when we set it, we need to parse it when we get it. So if all that's there, so that's our use effect. So let's test this out. Are we able to persist our data? So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to application. I am going to clear everything out, and then I'm going to say hello. Alright, so that's awesome. Our tasks are now populating. So if I keep hitting enter, you can see that we are getting our so we have this set to, all these arrays are now set to local storage. So awesome. Now let's fix this null right here. And what we're going to do with the null is let's go back to our code. The first one's always null for some odd reason. So obviously this is not taking. So we have two ways to do this, and we're going to do this asynchronously. So what we're going to do is we're going to set form values. Form values is going to take a parameter into a callback function, and then we're going to so instead of passing in form values, we are going to pass in our state. And now let's see if that works. And if this works, I'll explain what it's doing. Alright, so let's go ahead. We have our empty array. So let's do hello, enter, enter. Alright, so that did not work. Alright, so that did not work. So let's go do it a different way. So let's go back to our code, and we're just, instead of saying null here, we're just going to say date.now. Alright, we'll resave it, come back to our local storage, say hello. Alright, awesome, we have our ID. Is it the same ID? Nope. Alright, good. So it generates a new ID every time. Let's refresh. And we have a logical issue here because it's erasing local storage. It's not supposed to erase local storage. So let's go look at our logic for local storage. And that's in our app. So if task is equal there, bam. Let's take out this remove item and see if it just overwrites. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so hello, enter, 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 just to get 4 in there, and then we're going to click refresh. And it's still emptying out the task. Alright, so my logic is flawed, and this is the good part about being a JavaScript developer, is Alright, so if task is equal to that, an empty array, that should be working. So let's throw a debugger in here. So what debugger is going to let me do is look at the look at it line by line. So we'll go ahead and save that, and then we're in debug mode. Okay, so let's we're going to go through and look at this. So task is an empty array, and it's not evaluating an empty array. Okay, so let's go change the logic. So we'll go ahead and push play on that. And then if I do hello, let's make sure that we're going to step. So this is never calling. Okay. Alright, so let's go change our code. Again, sorry about this. This is live. And so we're going to say task.length not equal to 0. Alright, so we're getting the item. So the first one should run 0. So alright, let's save it. And let's go ahead and step into our function call. Alright, so it's populating the else. Do I have the else in the wrong one? I do. Okay. So we know that since task.length is an empty array and it's set to 0, it's automatically hitting this else statement. So I need to put some more logic in my else. Actually, I need to switch that to 0. All right, hold on. Let's switch it to 0. So to equal 0. All right, now let's do it and see if it triggers that code. So give it a moment to refresh. All right, so now we're refreshing. We're going to step into it. All right, so there we go. All right, let's just play it out. And we are in an infinite loop, it looks like. All right. So we have created an infinite loop. So that infinite loop is because I only want to check it once. All right. So now I'm going to put another use effect in, because I only want it doing one time if on load if task.length is equal to 0. So let's do another use effect, and this time we will set that dependency to task, and basically if task So how do we want to set this? Because I want this to fire every time that task is changed. So let's do some logic. So if, and then we're going to do a local storage dot get item, and we're going to say we are going to JSON parse this. And we're saying our thing is task. Dot length is not equal to, oops, I spelled the length wrong. Is not equal to task dot length right, so there we go. So let's that's where we're going to set the task. So we're just going to say set task, or my bad, we're going to set our local storage to that. Set item, and then we're going to pass in our task and our task. Alright, let's save that and see if that works. So task is 0. Alright, so we're going to step into the junction call, and excuse me while I go through here and let's just play it out. Alright, so very good. So, oh, my bad. Let me refresh the app. I was still in my infinite loop that time. Now we wait for React to make up its mind. Let's just open up another local host. There we go, and we'll close the non-responsive one out. Alright, inspect this new one. Alright, and find our application. We see that we have task is empty. Alright, so let's add a task. Alright, so that's working, but it's not, this is what happens when you don't stringify it. So let's go back to our code. And in our use effect, we need to come over here and go json.stringify and then bring in our task. Alright. So go ahead and refresh this. And something's not. Let's clear local storage. Refresh again. Cannot read property length of null. Okay, so let's go in here and do a little short circuit conditioner. So if local storage dot get item task and that should fix that. Alright, there we go. So we don't have it in there. Let's do our hello, enter, enter, and it's broke. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. I figured it out. So pretty much what I was doing was the conditionals were set up to never work. So what I went in is, on my use effect where it checks the task.length and every time the length changes, So here I put in a short circuit conditionals if we have it, and then we're going to check it. Else we're going to just go ahead and set the item. So now that we have that working, and we look at our app, which if we refresh, we see that we still get it. We can add to it by pressing, put it in there and press enter. So now the only other thing I need to do is I need to go after submit, we need to clear our form. So we will work on that, because we could do just clear out the initial state, but we're going to work on actually rendering these items to the DOM first. So let's go make that component. And it's actually going to be 2 components. So let's go in here. Let's make a under task. Let's make a new folder called task list. All right. And then in that, we're going to call a new file. We're going to have a task list component. And then we're going to have a task component. All right. So there we go. So now that we have our 2 here, let's go ahead and do our shortcut. So if you remember, RFCE will give us our task list component. And then here, I'm just going to, I'm going to hit escape to get to one thing. So here, I'm going to define some temp data. So I'm going to just say const temp ARR equals, and then I just want to go 1, 2, 3. And I'll explain what that's doing here in just a second. But what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and temp array.map, and then that map's going to take in a number, and then I want to render the task with number key equals, we're just going to do key equals number, and number equals number. We will come back and fix that. All right, so and then we need to make sure that we import our task from task. All right, and let's go do our task real quick. So now we know that we're going to do our RFCE again. Make sure we know that we're bringing in props, and we're bringing in something called number. And once again, erase that I don't need. And then the only thing I want to do here is display the number. And it'll just be a little p tag for now. All right. So then let's go to our app and let's render this. So all we got to do is render task list. And then we got to make sure that we bring it in. All right, task list. All right, so let's save and see if we get 1, 2, 3 on the screen. So if we go look, if you see right here, we have 1, 2, 3. So now we know that we're mapping over to an individual task. All right, that's awesome. So now instead of mapping over to tasks, let's get the task actually mapped over. So what I'm going to do here is come back in here to my app. Let me find my app. All right. And I'm just going to pass down the task. All right, awesome. So now that we have our task going down to our task list, let's go to our task list. And we're no longer going to do the temp array. We're just going to bring in tasks just like that. And we're going to map over that. Then we're going to change this callback parameter to task. And then we're going to set this to the task.id for the key. And instead of a number, we're going to actually bring in a task. All right, and then our task component is, instead of a number, we're just going to do a task. And that task, right now, the only thing I want to display is the task.task. kind of weird, but the way we named it up here is task, so that's why we're doing task, but task.task. Alright, so now if we go back to our browser, you now see that we have 3 hellos. And if I add something else like goodbye, it adds to the thing. So there we go. We got our task rendering to the screen, and we've got our form working. So let's work on bringing the router into this, and how will the router work? So we know that we have 2 main components in the app. We have our task list and we have our form. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define our routes for that. So instead of rendering this on the root route, we're going to tell it what to render on which route. So let's go into our code and go back to our app. So now we need to import route, and I'm also going to import switch. Now switch is something you've probably not seen before, but I'll explain what it does in when we get to it. Alright, so we imported our route and our switch from React Router DOM. So notice that we're down here, we are rendering a task form and a task list. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap our routes inside the switch. So let's go ahead and define our switch. Alright, so what our switch does is it makes it, you have to have an absolute match on your route. It's a really nice thing. The difference between putting your routes inside a switch and not is the order of your routes. So you want your root route to be on the bottom, not on the top. So let's define our root route. So we're going to say route. I always put the exact on the root route. So this is going to be our path equals, and that's to the root route. And since I'm sending props down, I actually have to do a render. Alright, so that render is going to take props, and it's going to render the task list. Alright, and then I'm going to spread in my prop, not dot apply. Then I'm going to spread in my props, and then I'm going to also send out my task equals task, and close it off, and then close off the route. So what this props is doing here is giving you, it gives that component access to the React router props, so you'll have access to history, match, and location. We don't need it for this, but I'm just going to leave this in here so you can see it. So now we divided our thing. Now I want to define a route. Path is going to equal, let's just do /add task. And that's also going to be a render because we're passing in props that way. Props equals, and then let's see, task form. I'm also going to spread in my props. And then I'm going to pass in my set task and my task. And then close off my task form, and then close off my route. Alright, so now we can go ahead and just take those out, and let's test out to see if our routes are working. Alright, so let's go ahead and do, make sure it saves, then go up here. Alright, now I just have hello and goodbye, my list here from my storage. That's good. So if I go to my thing and I do add task, I did not get anything. So did I misspell it? I may have. Yes, I misspelled it. So there's my add task. Notice I have my add task on there and not the task list itself. So there we go. So now we've got 2 routes defined. All right. So what I want to do here is Alright, so now that we've got our router added, let's go into our add form and let's push it back to the root route so we can get our list back after it adds. So let's go we'll go to our task form component, and then our task form here where it says where we're setting the task. Alright, so we're no longer going to console log this. What I'm going to come up here and do is I'm going to pull out history from props. Okay, and then come down here, and then I'm just going to say history dot push and push it to the root route. So let's see if that is the desired functionality. So if I add another goodbye and press enter, we're back on our root route. That's why I didn't reset the I did not reset the form data when we hit submit, because I knew that when I press enter I was going to come back to the root route and the form was going to come off the screen. So awesome, we have that, but we have no, do we really want to type /add task to our form every time? Not literally. So let's do something inside of our task list. Alright, and we're going to add a button that says add to do or add task. So let's go into our task list component, and right after we render all the tasks, let's go up here and import link from React router DOM. Alright, and then let's just go here and we're going to say let's have a button. That button is going to do a link to equals /add task, and in there we're just going to say add task. Alright, so let's go see if that works. Alright, go back to our, oh, we have an add task. Ooh, and that nice little button here, and it shows a link, right? So if I click add task, nice. And then if I hit back, we can do that, but let's add another button to our form saying cancel, so, or submit and cancel. So let's go to our form and let's put in two buttons there. So we got our input. So inside of our form, let's give it a button submit and a button cancel. Alright, so our button submit is going to be of a type equals submit. Our button cancel, well, let's go up here and just define a function cancel for handle cancel, and that's not going to take anything, and the only thing it's going to do is history.push. So it's just pretty much going to push you back to the route. So then we'll just do a on click handler, and that's going to be handle cancel. Alright, so let's make sure that works. Alright, so it compiles well. Let's go ahead and hit add task. We now have a submit and a cancel. If I hit cancel, it takes me back. Awesome. And then if I hit add task, awesome. Alright, so now that we have our add task button to add a task, and we have our cancel button to bring us back. Alright, so let's do some styling. Alright, what if I wanted to strike through the completed, but I need a way to toggle completed, right? So how would we toggle completed? Okay, so let's think about this. So we know that we're going to need a on click to handle the completed to true. So I think we're going to do that inside of the task. Well, let's think about this. How would I want to click here to make it strike through when it was completed? Now let's go look at our structure. So we know that we have on our app, we're in our task list, we are sending down set task. Oh, my bad. We're just sending down the task. We're not setting any way to update it. So let's go ahead and pass down set task to our list component. So, all right, so we're going to go ahead and pass that down. Let's go look at task list, right? Well, our task list is taking in task, and then we're going to set task. But we're pushing that down another component, right? Let's not destructure our props here. All right. Let's not do that. Let's come in here and say, yeah, we want to keep our key at props.taskID, but because we're not using task, we're not viewing our task here. The only thing we're doing is mapping over it. So we'll just go ahead and do props.task there, so that way we can map over it. We're still going to need our task, so let me Control Z back to that. We're still going to need that, right? And the way I was going to show you does not make sense, so we'll go back to task and set task. All right. So now we're populating task, and then we're going to go ahead and bring set task down to our main component. All right, so let's go look at this. Let's go look at our task. All right, so now we're just, the only thing we're doing here is just listing out our task. Well, this doesn't make much sense. Let's make it an actual list. You want to make it an actual list? That sounds good. So we're going to make this an LI, right? And /LI. And we're going to just take out the div. Oops. So we're just going to take out the div. And then in our task list, surrounding the task map, we're going to do an unordered list. So now that our task, oops, I have a props, or I put props in there. Let me take that out. So let's go look and let's see if we have a, we now have an unordered list. Oh, that's good. We've got a list. Awesome. But I still want to click on this, and when I click on this, I want to flip the completed to true. So let's go into our code, and let's go look at our individual task. So we need to define a style for this. We need to text decorate it on style. We want to text decorate it to underline. So we have a few ways we can do this. Let's go ahead and make just a plain old CSS class. But actually, I think we can do it better. Let's go look at the Bootstrap documentation. So React Bootstrap. And let's go look at the documentation. We want to get started. And I want to look out, is it utilities that have that? Getting started. Theming. Oh wow, they've added theming and customizing styles. Oh, that's nice. I'll have to look into that later. Alright, so let's look at our that's our layout. Our components. Alright, so let me go to the regular Bootstrap documentation and see how they toggle the so we're looking at the actual regular Bootstrap documentation. That's layout, content, typography. That's what I was looking for. Alright, so it looks like we have a highlight, and then we have this nice little tag here that says /del. Well, let's test to see if that works. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put that tag in our code and see if it actually does it. Because I've never tried that before. Alright, so let's go see if that actually does it. So let's go look at our browser and go look at our app, and lo and behold, well, look at that. So how are we going to conditionally render that with an on-click? And let's think about this. So on-click, when you click that, so let's define an on-click here. So let's go up here and define our function, and we're going to call this toggle complete. Right? Toggle complete will take no parameters. And what I want to do is I want to set task. And I'm not even bringing that in because all I was bringing in was task. So let's Alright, so what are we going to toggle complete? Alright, so let's think about this. Toggle complete. You know, there's a better way to do this. We're going to take this functionality and put it in the app. And then we'll send that down to things. So let's come up here and define it here. And so that toggle complete is going to take an ID. Okay? That ID, alright, it's going to be the ID of the task that we're going to toggle. So what we're going to do is const updated task equals task.map. It's going to take an individual task, and then we're going to open up our code block. Now that task, what we're going to check for, if task.id, so let me open up my parentheses, task.id is equal to ID, so the ID that we're passing back up from our component, we're going to simply return so we're going to return a object where we're going to spread in our task, and then our completed is going to be not task.completed. Alright, else we're just going to return our task. So we're passing in our task and we are flipping it, so maybe that's that toggle complete, you can toggle back and forth with it. So that's, and then at the end of it, which is right there, so we're going to set our task to updated task. Alright, so instead of passing down set task to our, we're going to pass down toggle. I'm going to call it toggle, and it's going to be toggle complete. Alright, so let's go to our task list, and do the same thing. So now we have a toggle instead of set task, and then we have a toggle here. So we're just going to pass in our toggle. Alright, now let's go to our tasks here where we're down. So we're going to have to do this. So if we're going to do up here, so what we're going to do is this: if task.completed, right? This is going to be toggle. If task.completed, actually we can do this inline a lot easier. So we got our li, right? So let's go ahead and put this down here. And then we're going to surround this in a JavaScript expression. And we're going to say task.completed question mark. That's what we want to return. Else task.task. And because this is in a actual JavaScript expression, I had to open up this and then do this. And the same way over here, I need to open this up as a string iterable, and there. Alright, so let's look. Alright, something, it doesn't like something. Let's try that. That works. That works. Alright, let's go look at our list and make sure our list is not, all of them should be not completed. So let's go look at it, and the strike through is not there because it's not deleted. Alright, so let's do the on-click functionality. So the on-click functionality for toggling a completed is going to be handled by the li tag, and then only thing I'm going to do is say on-click equals, and then I'm going to pass in my arrow function, so that way I can send the toggle back up to the app. And then the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle task.id, and I'm going to pass the task ID back up. So let's see if now, if I'm getting strike through and it didn't work. Toggle is not a function. Okay, so let's go find out why toggle is not a function, because obviously it didn't pass down through props, right? So I have toggle there. Task list, I have toggle there. I'm passing in toggle there. So let's go to our app. Toggle is toggle complete. And toggle complete is a function that takes an ID. Alright, so let's do some console logging here. So let's console log toggle and see what it is there. Alright, so go to our console. Toggle is undefined. Alright, awesome. Let's go to our app, because that's where I'm passing it down from. And did I misspell it? I have toggle equals toggle complete. So let's console log props and see what we got going on. So go back to our task list, and instead of that we're going to console log props. It might say it's undefined. It is undefined. So we're just going to switch this to props and switch this here to props. Bless me. Alright, so props dot toggle. Oh, my bad. All right. So there we go. So now let's look at our props. Our props, we have the task, but we do not have, we have all of our tasks, but we do not have the toggle method. So why aren't we getting toggle down there? Where did I mess up at? So let's go to our app. Oh, so if you see, I defined it outside of route. Outside of the actual task list, I had it in the route component instead of the task list component. So now if we go look at our thing, we now have a toggle. So if I click there, we now have a working toggle that works on everything. Awesome. That's nice. That is very nice. So now let's make sure that the it's updating in our local state. So it is not. So let's go get this working. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the use effect. In our, because the length is never changing. So instead of dot length, we're just going to do task. All right, so when we come back to our component, and now we're working. Everything's being set correct. We can now toggle between true and false. Awesome. All right, so now we have our task list rendering to the screen. We can click add task and add a task here. So new task. All right, awesome. So we have that. We can cancel if we hit add task. So what's the next functionality we want to do? All right, so let's do a remove completed task. So we're going to add a new button to our task list called delete completed. So let me go in here and go back to our form. And in our task list where we had this little button that says link to thing. So what I want to do is I want to put another button in here. All right. On that button, I want to take and delete task. All right, so our delete task is going to be another function that we pull out, that we're going to put in app, right? And what we're going to do is we'll come up here, okay, and we're going to define a function delete completed. Delete completed does not take any parameters. And what we're going to do is const, we're going to do another map. All right. Well, no, we're not. We're going to do a filter method on delete. So what I want to do is I want to say updated task. I like using the same thing because it's in the scope of the function and not in global scope. So I'm going to take const updated task and I'm going to set that equal to task.filter. And then when that filter is going to do, it's going to take an individual task. And the only thing I want to return is task, not task.completed. All right, and before I do this, I just want to make sure it works. So I'm going to console log out the updated task just to make sure it works. So let's pass that down as props. So we're going to do a delete. We'll call it delete. And it's going to be delete completed. All right, so now we've got another function passing down to our prop. So we're prop drilling. Always lovely to prop drill. All right, so now let's go to our task list. And so we have our props. So what I'm going to do is here is I'm going to do a on click. All right, equals. And just like before, oh, actually, no, I don't have to. Since I'm not sending data back up, I can just say props.delete. Here. Alright, so let's go see if this works and make sure that we're getting, so I'm going to toggle a task. So let's go to our console. I'm going to toggle a task and I'm going to say delete task. Alright, awesome. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the screen and my object is only outputting 6. So awesome. So we know the filter is working. So now the only thing I need to do now is go in and actually set the state to the new task. So let's go back to our app and all right, let's go ahead and do let's go ahead and set task, updated task. All right, let's see what happens when we do this here. So if I go into my thing now, let me, so it's completed, right? So if I hit delete task, goodbye is gone. So let's take all the hellos out just to make sure it works. And there. So now we have complete functionality with delete. So now at this stage in our app, we have been able to get, we have been able to add or create. So we've done create, we've done read, and we have done delete. So we have got the 3 of the 4 Crud functionalities working. So let's work on edit or update. Update is one of the trickiest ones to do. And the way I'm going to show you is a little bit of the easier way. So let's go into our app. In our app.js, we have this path equals add task. All right, awesome. We got that. What I wanted to do is I want to define another route. That route is going to render a task form, but it's going to render, it's going to edit instead of create, or it's going to update instead of create. So let's go ahead and do that. So we know that we need a route, right? Our path is going to be equal to /edit task /:ID. So that ID is the key. That ID is going to be able to get the task based on the ID. All right, awesome. So let's go ahead and do our render. And then what I'm going to do to save a little bit of time is I'm just going to copy and paste the actual render prop from our add form route. Now, I'm going to add an extra prop to this to make this easy for y'all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name a edit prop. And the edit prop is either true or false based on which route you're on. So I'm adding it to both. So if you're on the add route, edit is false. If you're on the update route, edit is true. So awesome. So now that we got that up to date, let's go create a edit button for our list. So now we know that we have a LI where it says you have here where we can toggle this LI. So what I want to do here is we see this. So I want to create a button on each one. So let's look at this. Let's see if this button just works. I'm just going to say edit. All right, so let me save it. And let's go look and see what this looks like. All right, let's go look. Oh, now we have edits there. It's not styled that well. That's fine. It's not styled that well. We can get to styling. But now we have our edit buttons right now. They don't do anything but click. And the problem is now if you click edit, we're going to have to actually do that outside of the LI. So let's go back to our component. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to bring something from React library called a fragment. Our fragment pretty much all it does is instead of rendering divs, we can just do fragment like that. And now we can put everything in our thing. Now, sometimes our fragments can look like this. But, yeah, so let me... Sometimes our fragments... Well, I just commented everything. Can look like that, but you can do it either way. So outside of this thing, I'm going to take this button component and I'm just going to put it outside the LI. The reason I'm doing it outside is because we already have an on-click handler toggling the ID, which gives us this strike through component. So let's control save that, and now let's go see what that looks like. So now our edit is underneath each one. That's good. And then we still have, if you click on the task, it changes it. So nice. Alrighty, so now that we got our edit button, let's work on its functionality. Alright, in our task component that's rendering each individual task, we're going to need to import the link from the React router. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and import link, and it's a named import from React router DOM. Alright, so on that link here inside of this button is where we're going to send our link. So we're going to say link and then 2 equals, well, this equals has to be an interpreted string, and you're going to go edit task /$ task.id. Then we're going to close that out, and then we're going to come down below edit and there. So let's just go make sure that in our app we did define it as edit task ID, and we did. Alrighty, so that looks good. Let's save it. Now let's go back and see what we got going on here. If we click edit, it should bring up the form. It does bring up the task form, and it does bring it up via ID. So awesome. So let's go work on the task form to get this functionality to work. All right. So in our task form, we now know that we have a edit prop on props now, right? So, and that we are, our use state effectively is setting the default state on add. So we're going to bring in the use effect hook. Okay. So use effect. And what we're going to do on use effect is we're going to use it. Remember, our use effect takes a callback function and a dependency array, but we only want to use the dependency. We only want to do it on load. So how do I want to do this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if edit, open up my curly braces, right? So if it's an edit, I want to filter the task array to be match the I want the ID to match the match.params.id. So what I'm going to do here is also I'm going to bring in my match, but I'm going to destructure it down. So when I do that match colon, open up, I am also going to do params, another colon, and then ID. So right there, instead of saying saying props.match.params.id, now I can just reference it by ID. So what we're going to do is say we're going to define a variable, say const edit task equals, and then we're going to do the task.filter, and then we're going to provide our callback, which is each individual task, and then I only want to return where task.id.toString is equal to ID. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my form values to edit task. All right. So right there is when the task form component loads, it's going to check to see if the edit prop is true. It's then going to filter through all the tasks and bring in and only have the task to the ID. Now, in order to do that, since filter returns an array, we need to return the 0 index. So we actually have the individual task and not an array of one task. All right, so we've got the use effect impact. So that should bring us up to, that should populate state with the current task that's being edited. All right, so we got to define a couple more things. So now we have our handle submit, right? Well, we're going to have to define two more functions. We're going to have to we're going to define a function called update task. All right. And update task, just like before, is a little bit different. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through all the tasks. All right, so we're going to base thing up there. So we're going to do our const updated task equals task dot map. All right, it's going to take an individual task. And let's open up our code block. And what we're going to do is if task.id is equal to ID, so remember we got to do this dot to string here because we're comparing it string to string. All right, if that is that, open it up. I want to return form values. All right, so I want to return the updated values. Else we're just going to return task. All right, so now that gives us our updated task. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set task to updated task. All right. Now now we need to do a let me do a add task. All right, and that add task, well, guess what? That functionality we already did. All right, so let's go up here and just do this. We're going to Control C, X, and put that there. Nice. Now, here's the fun part. We're going to actually do, so we have add task and update task, but we have this handle submit. So what I want to do is I want to check edit. If we're in edit mode, I want to call update task. If not, I want to call add task. So basically what it's saying is if it's edit, if we're editing a task, I want this to handle the update task function and update my state based on the updated task. If this is add task, then we're just going to add a new task to it. All right, so let's go see if this works. All right, it looks like expected an assignment or function call and says on expression on line 39. All right, it does not like that. So let's just change this. Instead of doing it that way, let's go if edit. Let's do update task. Oh, maybe, oh, it would help if I actually invoke the functions instead of just typing them out. So let's see if that does it. That does it. All right. Let's refresh. All right, so we have an error. Cannot read property task of undefined. So what is happening here is I didn't set this. So I will go in a second and fix that. So let's just go to localhost and refresh. Alright, so I lost all my tasks because of that error. That's the downside of using local storage. If you error out, you lose what you had. Alright, so let's go ahead and add a task. Hello, submit. Now I have my hello. What if I want to say hello world? So let's click on edit. Hello is already in there. And I put submit, put world and submit. And it did not change. Alright, so why did it not change? Hello world, and that should have changed. So let's go look in console log out. Handle change form values. So let's console log out form values. All right. And yes, I told you edit was a little tricky sometimes. So let's click edit, click world, click submit. So I am getting it, but it's not changing. It's not changing in local storage. So let's go look at the local storage because I am getting it and it should be changing. ID is still the same. Alright, let's look and see if our map is actually working. Alright, so let's go into our code, and what we're going to do is we're going, instead of relying on the match.params ID, I'm going to pass in a different ID. I'm going to call it task ID. And what we're going to do is do that task ID right there. And then where we're calling it from is, see, we're calling it here. So what we're going to do is do form values dot ID. All right. Let's save that and see if we get it to work then. Alright, so I want to click edit, world, submit. Still not getting it. Alright, so let's go look at our map function and make sure, see which one's being, and we're going to console log out the IDs based on the thing. So let's go look at this. I told y'all update is a little tricky. So what I want you to do is console log out found task ID, or else not found. Alright, so let's see what this does for us and see if this map functionality is working. So I'm going to click edit, I'm going to click world, and click submit. Alright, so some odd reason it doesn't like this ID because it ran it and said it was not found. Alright, so let's let's go back in there and figure out why it's not matching. So let's see, let's console log that form. You know why? Because I'm trying to compare it to string. Because I was doing it on the parameter before, but now I don't need to do it with the string. So let's see if that works. So let's go ahead and hit hello world and click submit, and there we have edit functionality. So awesome. At this time, that is the full update, create, read, update, and delete functionality for a to-do app. I'm going to commit this code up to GitHub, and I will share it with this. I will share it with this video. If y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thanks, guys.